Part 2, jerkbait rods. That's right, we got a bunch of feedback from you, the viewers, and some of the people here in the office gave us a little grief about a couple of those early selections. So this is part 2. We got a bunch of them to get through here, so I'll try and breeze through them pretty fast. I'm gonna start off with Patrick Walters' Tula Elite AGS jerkbait rod. And why this rod? I'm throwing this one rod in there because we were just watching Patrick today catching him, and catching him on a jerkbait too. Patrick is one of, in my opinion, if you follow tournaments very closely, he's not underrated as a jerkbait angler, but just nationally, I just don't think a lot of people understand the absolute vacuum cleaner the dude is with the jerkbait. So there's a hard argument right now that he might know a little bit more about modern day electronics wise jerkbait fishing than anybody, because if you look at the proofs in the pudding, right, look how much money the kid winning fishing a jerkbait. So full cork handle, thanks Patrick. AGS guides on this one. Now he does have a version of this rod in the non-AGS rods, and I got a little tip for you on that. That one's a little bit softer. So if you are into more parabolic, softer jerkbait rods, check out his standard model. But then this model here in the AGS feels like it's got a lot more backbone, which makes a lot of sense for the modern day jerkbait fishing we see going on, which is no longer just cold water technique, warm water as well. This thing came in at 4.4 ounces. Now I was kind of surprised with that because usually the AGS guide rods are super, super light. And 4.4 is still light by all means, and it does feel super balanced in hand, but this thing feels a lot more versatile than a jerkbait rod. And I'll get to more of that once we get it over here on the wall. Tula AGS Patrick Walters rod, and bending it, it's a little faster than it looks, I'm sure, on this board. It's definitely a regular action or moderate, what Dye will list it as. I know a lot of people that fish this rod, and they've told me this rod is a sleeper rod for a lot of your close quarters, like moving bait stuff too, like a spinnerbait rod, a topwater rod if you want one with a little. This thing's got way more meat than you would imagine for a jerkbait rod, which makes a lot of sense because Patrick's deploying this technique all year long. And I know a lot of you jerkbait purists done that for a long time anyway, but traditionally the thoughts around jerkbait fishing, the rods and the tackle have been built around colder water conditions, late fall, early spring. You know, now with our scopes and electronics, we're fishing jerkbaits all year round, a lot of people are, and sometimes you're fishing in deeper water than you normally would, like sinking jerkbaits or bigger jerkbaits and summertime style hooks on them, bigger line, all that stuff. So this rod's a lot more of like a actual moving bait rod with a little bit more backbone than just a jerkbait rod. Like I said, the action certainly looks on this wall like it's moderate. I will give it more of a mod fast, I would call it. Awesome rod. I can see why this one's a big fan favorite when it comes to like the one kind of jerkbait rod. So check out Patrick Walters' Tula AGS jerkbait rod. Next up, the Evergreen Combat Stick 6/8 medium. This rod right here came in at 3.8 ounces, and it feels like it. This thing feels super light, and I love the reel seat on this. This is that old school Fuji reel seat, the ECS I believe it is. Don't quote me on that, but it's kind of the old school Fuji reel seat that fits everybody's hands, and I wish more rod manufacturers just used them because they just feel great. This rod feels amazing. It feels a lot faster than a lot of the other rods I've been playing with. The tip feels really light, but it feels like it's got some good backbone. I'm excited to go bend this one on the wall over here. The Evergreen Combat Stick 6/8 medium fast action jerkbait rod. All right, back with that combat stick from Evergreen. This one being the 6/8, it's actually called a jerkbait topwater rod. And another correction, it's extra fast action they listed at. And I'm gonna tell you right now, it does feel extra fast. It absolutely wants to, the tip on this thing's super light, as you can tell as I'm playing with this, just twitching my wrist here. But when you load it up, you get far enough back in there that you could get away with some lighter line tactics. My favorite thing about this thing though is it's not so soft that I couldn't run like braid to a leader for a topwater, or even some 12 or 14 pound tests for a bigger jerkbait, really crack on them pretty hard. This seems like a pretty versatile, lightweight treble hook rod. Top water and jerkbait is exactly what it comes to mind, and with a shorter rod like this, like a 6/8, that's really where this thing would shine. I'm extremely impressed with this rod. I know Kip was himself when we pulled the rods for this filming session. This rod is a sleeper in this category. If you're in the market for a really sweet jerkbait rod that you could double up as like a popper rod and, you know, maybe some other, you know, treble hooked stuff like a little, that you're fishing maybe some tight quarters with, or if you're fishing right over top of your graph, this would be a killer rod for that. Check out the Evergreen Combat Stick and the 6/8 medium extra fast. Here's one for you. We're gonna get a little bougie on you now. Here it comes, the Poison Ultima. And I'm gonna tell you right now, this thing feels insanely light. Came in at 3.3 ounces, and it feels like it should come in the 2s. This thing weighs absolutely nothing. It feels pretty stout too. I'm pretty interested to see how this one goes. But this one here is a, I believe it was a 610 medium regular bend. So we're looking for a moderate action but medium power out of this rod. 610 should be the perfect jerkbait rod. I will say this, just bending it with a line on it here, it feels a lot stouter than a medium, so I'm interested to see how this thing does. Let's go bend the Poison Ultima 610 medium moderate. All right, Poison Ultima, this thing definitely, I had it wrong there. It's not a moderate action, it's a fast action, and it feels really fast, and it looks really fast on the wall. So much so I had to check, and I was wrong that it was moderate. It's fast action. This thing weighs nothing. I'm gonna tell you, if sensitivity is what you're after, yeah, and you're paying for it in this one, I know. Trust me, guys. But this thing's alive. It's a lightning bolt in your hand. It's incredibly alive feeling, and I'm very, very impressed with it. It is way stouter, just like I kind of thought with a line on it. Sometimes just bending it on the floor or with line on it in your hand does tell you a story, and this was right. This thing has got lots of power. This is by no means a light little jerkbait rod. You could do it with light line, loosen up your drag a little bit. You could certainly do it. And nowadays I'm seeing jerkbait rods get a little bit stiffer because of fishing during the warmer water summer months and things of that nature. But man, this thing, there's a lot of stuff you can do with this rod. You do not need to dedicate this to be a jerkbait rod, even though we were told this is an incredible jerkbait rod. I'm gonna tell you right now, it's so stout. It'd be easy to get a lot of action out of that jerkbait, I tell you that much. But I'd be a little nervous with super light line and light wire trebles. Now you're gonna, if you got some bigger trebles, deeper diving jerkbaits, anything like that, this thing would be fantastic. But I'm gonna tell you right now, you can throw a swim jig on this thing and be all right. It's got power and it is fast and it gets into the backbone up there and it is stout. So interesting rod here from Jackal Shimano Poison Ultima. If you're looking for a super high-end rod that weighs nothing, that would be fun and versatile as a jerkbait rod, check this thing out. Got to do the 110 special, right? We got ripped on for not doing this one in our first jerkbait special or jerkbait one, but this rod was newer and we hadn't got enough to really show it in sales. We'd sold out of every one we got, but we've gotten like 3s and 4s at a time a few times, nothing like in big numbers. But this is the P5 Destroyer lineup, and this is the 110 special from Megabass. This is a 611 medium fast action. This thing came in at 3.8 ounces, and I think any of you that have picked these things up know they feel really light, crisp, and alive. They have unsanded and unfinished blanks on them, which I like. Feels more responsive and snappy, you know. Cool stuff. I like the reel seats on these, even though they do have kind of that secondary little trigger there. Typically with most reel seats like that, I struggle with it. Not on this one. These are subdued enough, it doesn't really eat me alive like some of the other ones do. And even though the chuck's really decorative up here, it's far enough up where it gets the edges on it where it doesn't rub on your fingers real hard. So very, very highly sought after jerkbait rod, because Megabass is obviously the company that makes the Vision 110, which is the most popular jerkbait on planet Earth. So, at least with tournament anglers, I should say. We're gonna go ahead and bend the 611 medium fast action 110 special from the Megabass P5 Destroyer line. Okay, as promised, we're here with that Megabass Destroyer, the P5, the 110 special. Loaded up here, and it is fast. It wants to just bend up in that top section up there. Even when I really give it some backbone here, or really get into the backbone, then it gets back there a little bit further. But it wants to stay up in that tip section, which is kind of what we've learned a lot that you want in a jerkbait rod. You want that rod to just be bouncing around up that tip section, giving that bait darting action or whatever, but if they hit you and come at you with it or raise up in the water with it or anything, you want to be able to just turn and pull hooks right into that fish as fast as possible. You don't want to have to load up a super slow rod when you're doing the summertime jerkbait fishing, where you're really cracking and imparting action on them, maybe looking at your live scope or something like that. Now that super moderate action rod has its time and place as well, especially when you're fishing a little bit slower in those colder water presentations, but for the year-round jerkbaiter, this tends to be the action that a lot of people are after. There's no doubt about it, this rod is a special rod for a jerkbait angler and kind of a must-have if you're a Megabass or a JDM fan. You're definitely going to want to add one of these to your collection if you are a jerkbait angler. The 110 Special in the Megabass P5 Destroyer lineup. Here's an interesting one for you. This is a curveball. This is the Spro Mix Stick rod, made in the USA. That's right, these are a unique bunch of rods that came from Spro. I'm actually a really big fan of the rock crawler rod in this lineup. There's actually a Chad rod as well that's really nice in this family, but this one's weird. It lists it doesn't list power, it just lists the action of the rod, even on the blank here, as a medium heavy, the action medium heavy, which is not kind of against the grain of the way rod manufacturers typically do it, where you have a power and then an action. So this one being medium heavy action, don't know what that means. Bending it, it feels like a little bit like more on the moderate side, like a slow fast taper. I mean, there's a little bit of tip up there, but it wants to sort of bend a lot far away down the blank there. We're gonna go bend it over here. This thing came in at 3.7 ounces. It does feature that Fuji reel seat I was talking about earlier, that I think it's the ECS they call it. It's super nice to hang on to. Does have some exposed threads on the front. If I have a knock on it so far, that would be it right there. But other than that, this thing is unpainted. It feels crisp and alive and super light. So excited to go bend the Spro Mix Stick rod. All right, I'm here with that Spro Mix Stick rod as promised. I'm gonna go ahead and bend it, and yeah, this thing's more of a moderate action, and I don't get the medium heavy thing either. I'd have to say that this feels more like a medium power rod to me than a medium heavy. And it's I'd say mod fast. It's not super slow. It's more moderate fast. It wants to bend all the way down the blank, you know, halfway down the blank when I really load it up. But if I'm just imparting action on the rod, it's definitely more tippy up there than it felt with just bending the line on it. It's more mod fast, I'd call it, for sure. I'm gonna be honest, I'm very impressed with this rod. For a US manufactured rod, this thing feels like a little weapon. It does, I don't know how to explain it, it just feels snappy and alive and feels awesome. I have one knock on this rod, and that is exactly what I talked about before. The threads are exposed once you roll the chuck down there, and I tend to put my fingers forward on the reel like this, but I have mine up on the blank when I fish a jerkbait a lot, kind of push my pointer finger up against the blank when I crack on it. So I don't think that would affect me as much as I fear it would. This rod is really nice. If you're looking for a made in the USA jerkbait rod or something different than all your buddies got, you need to check this thing out. I think I'm gonna be trying the Spro Mix Stick rod out myself. All right, guys, this is about as budget as we get in this one so far. I'm sorry we went a little high bucker on this episode for you. But this is a Dobbins Caden rod, and as you guys know, some of the most popular budget-friendly rods we sell here at Omnia Fishing, this being no exception. This is a 610 medium moderate. So this is a jerkbait rod, right? By normal standards there. Comfy reel seat on it, as I've been talking about a lot, full cork handle. This thing should be right up my alley. If you look on the chuck here, as I talked about before, there is one exposed thread on it, but not much at all. So my little knock on exposing the threads when you lock the chuck down on the front of the rod, with this jerkbait rod especially, this one does a little bit nicer job than the previous rod I was talking about, but still has a little bit of exposed thread. That'd be my one knock I feel on it so far. But this thing feels faster just bending it than moderate right now, but we're gonna go bend it on the wall there. This thing did come in at 4.7 ounces, so it's definitely on the heavier side of the rods we did, but this thing's also like legitimately almost like half the price, if not way less than half the price to a lot of the rods we've been talking about today. So it's a value rod, and it does not feel heavy. I do have a pretty big reel on it here. It's just one of my personal reels here, and it just balances out beautifully. So it doesn't feel heavy at all. So let's go bend Ben this Dobbins Caden 610 medium moderate. All right, here I am with that Dobbins Caden 610 medium moderate, and oh yeah, it's way more moderate than I felt like it was with the line on. With the line on, I can just kind of bend the tip of it over because the tip's so light on this rod. But even when I just impart a little action on it, it's pretty mod fast. But then as soon as you really do put any really pressure on it, it's moderate. A lot more moderate than I thought it was going to be. So this would be an excellent high landing percentage rod, as you hear us talk about a lot here. If you like running really stiff lines, stiff fluorocarbons, even braid if you're topwater fishing or something like that. I typically don't see a lot of people braid fishing jerkbaits just because of losing fish and treble hooks and things like that, and especially braid getting tangled up in treble hooks on a tumbling cast or anything like that. But this would be a perfect rod if you're a braid angler, if you're a really stiff fluorocarbon angler, if you want to run light hooks or heavy duty hooks. This would be a versatile jerkbait rod for you. Great price point. I love full cork handles, you guys know that, and I can already tell you why. Whereas I sit here and bend on this thing, it's perfect for me. I will say the threads and the chuck there aren't bothering me one bit. I would not have an issue cracking on a jerkbait with this handle at all. So remove what I said before about the chuck bothering me up there. It's not bothering me one bit. It's not abrasive or grabbing my finger at all. So really great budget rod here from Dobbins that is, you know, it's by no means budget nowadays is changing, it's getting up there, but this would be a great buy if you want a really nice jerkbait rod with good action for getting fish in the boat for a tournament angler. So check out the Dobbins Caden 610 medium moderate.